Speech can give expression to good, but it can also give expression to sin. There's good in creation, but there's also the sin in the words of the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And this is this kind of double-edged power of speech is very important for us to handle carefully. We recognise its power, and therefore we need to be extremely careful how we handle it. There are two passages in James, which both in chapter 3, which are incredibly good in the imagery on this. Let's look at those now. Verses 9 to 12. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. So there's a real challenge to us there, to guard our tongues as we would any other part of our body. But he's also good on the stakes, and again the imagery is stark. In verses 5 and 6, likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue is also a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Well, you struggle to get stronger imagery than that. We do hold this incredible power. And while many of us may feel called to be prophetic, and that the church is called to be prophetic, we need to handle that very carefully. Look around the US presidential election as a really good example. Here you find Christians, as well as others, using the kind of language to describe people, those engaged in the presidential election, that they would normally shy away from. There is some incredibly strong language around. Language which is insulting, language which is mocking, language which puts things in incredibly deprecating terms around one or other of the candidates. And the question really that I would put is, are you sure that you're being prophetic when you're speaking in that way? Because what people see isn't necessarily the view of Christianity that you would think that you would want to express as being that of the love of God. So we need to handle these things very, very carefully. Prophets lead different lives. They don't only say different things. They're not only people who shout loudly and are sure that they're doing it for God. If you look at Ezekiel, he had this great vision where God revealed himself to him. And he did different things because he was commanded to by God. He did things which reduced his status among his own people to zero. He acted out God's judgment. And he showed people through the way he was living that he was a prophet. It wasn't only the words that he said, it's that those words were interpreting the actions that he did. So when we're dipping in and out of social media and being prophetic, or when we're popping up on news programs and being prophetic, let's make sure that we're careful that our lives are those prophetic, as well as our words. That gap is very visible where it exists. Where Jesus is separate to us and where we can't touch him is that there was no gap. With Jesus, he lived a sinless life. He did things which shocked people, which were incomprehensible to people, and in his words he explained and taught people what he meant by those actions. Actions around healing, the wonders that he showed people, the signs, around the temple. There were things here that Jesus was doing and that he was able to explain with his words. Now with us, there's always a gap because there's always sin in the church and there is always sin in the lives of each of us. So let's be careful that we know that we're holding that tension and that we're always pointing towards the one who is without sin and leaning on his example, leaning on his power and not our own. Speech is an incredibly powerful act, and if we're not careful, it can be an act that does more damage than good. So let's handle it with great care.